it was a blast. Not only are they really fun to be around, but as they love talking about games as much as I do, I found discussing what we thought worked and didn't work about whatever we played to be just as, if not more, enjoyable than actually playing it. Also, our playthroughs have all turned into videos, and like not everything needs to or should be content, but I gotta admit I really like having these curated versions of our playthroughs to look back at. I think they capture an energy that is nice for me to relive and easy for anyone else to connect with. They also show off a different side of me than these essays do. Like all humans, I am multifaceted, but I sometimes struggle to convey all of those facets here, so having the chance to try to be entertaining in a much different way than people expect from me has been a nice exercise. Not that I plan to move away from essay content, but it has been a solid outlet and gotten me to want to find more ways to express the fuller scope of who I am. Now, it certainly is much harder to make time for co-op games than single-player games, as I have to work around other people's schedules, and mine is pretty complicated at the moment, but it is something I hope to continue to make time for, as there's a lot of joy to be had in it. Along with sharing games with friends, I also shared games with my toddler for the first time. Or a game, really. Near the beginning of the year, my wife and I reset our Animal Crossing island as we wanted to experience the early parts of it again. One day, when I admittedly was feeling too tired to keep up with my daughter's non-stop running around the house, I let her watch me play for a little bit. Not wanting her to fully zone out and be hypnotized by the lights, colors, and sounds, I narrated everything I was doing and tried to get her to do the same. Every few days, she'd watch me play for 10 to 15 minutes, and once she had an understanding of what was going on, as I played, she'd talk about what bugs I caught and exclaim, "Uh-oh, net broke," every time one ran out of durability. I also would set the camera to a stationary position, then hide behind something on the screen and have her call out where I was. I don't really know if video games will become important to her. To be honest, it isn't my goal to make sure they do. Something my parents were really great about was letting me like what I liked, never pushing me to like what they did. Instead, they just showed passion for their interests, and in some cases that rubbed off on me and I ended up being interested in those things too. It doesn't really matter to me if it works, but that's how I want to model my hobbies. So with that, I fully understand that as small as this is, it might be the peak of us gaming together, and that's okay with me. It was a fun way to spend some time during a handful of afternoons, and I appreciate the ways it forced me to view the game as a parent instead of as just a player. Figuring out how to make it digestible for her and make her an active participant gave me a new perspective on the game. It became less about accomplishing any goals in the title and more about using the game as a tool to create something engaging for her. If video games do end up being a hobby she shows interest in the future, I look forward to examining more titles through that unique lens. And if not, it was nice to see at least one through fresh eyes again. My wife and I also played a decent bit of Baldur's Gate 3 together for another informal experiment. All things considered, she didn't get that far into the game, but aside from Animal Crossing, it probably is the most amount of time she's put into any single title. While I always enjoy doing gaming for non-gamer stuff with her, I found this one to be especially fun. Some people seem to think that my goal with the series is to properly ease her into the hobby, and maybe that's what I should have done, but what I've always found to be the most interesting is throwing her into experiences far outside of her depth and seeing what happens. And Baldur's Gate 3 was far, far outside of her depth, so witnessing the ways in which she worked things out felt like the perfect encapsulation of the series, or at least what I want from the series. I also really enjoyed playing co-op with her. Generally, I try to just be a silent observer, but I wanted to see what the game would feel like for her if she did have some help, and it ended up leading to a bunch of fun moments that make me want to play more co-op stuff with her in the future. Even though the game never came close to clicking with her, actually playing something together proved to be really nice. Now, while it might seem like I only played games with other people during this time of the year, I did play some stuff on my own, and most of it was pretty solid. Iron Lung executed its core premise flawlessly, Chance of Sonar provided thoughtful puzzles in the form of decoding mysterious languages, Penny's Big Breakaway contained some of the smoothest 3D platforming I've experienced in a long while, Lisfanga the Timeshift Warrior used time loops as an effective and intriguing combat mechanic, and Balatro forced me to uninstall it from my computer as it was taking up far too much of my time. The thing is, despite enjoying these games as well as the others I played during that span, I found myself feeling a slight disconnect with them. They were good, but they didn't end up meaning all that much to me. And that's fine. I know not every game I play is going to click with me like that, but due to the premises of a lot of them, I kind of expected them to. Like time loops and solving mysteries are kind of my thing. So for all no real lasting impact, I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. And this sort of thing isn't new. I felt it last year in some ways with Tears of the Kingdom, which despite me putting in 100 hours and loving every minute, I stopped thinking about it pretty much as soon as the credits rolled. I think what felt different this time though is that it wasn't just one game that I thought would mean more to me than it did. It was a long stretch of them. It felt like a pattern. But honestly, that wasn't something I could spend much time worrying about because before I could even fully process it, my second kid was born. With our first, there was a good long while after she was born where I didn't play any games at all. I felt so in over my head that the idea of doing anything that felt normal seemed impossible. This time around though, we had a better idea of how to be parents. Of course, doubling the amount of children in our household created all sorts of new chaos to sort through, but we weren't doing it as people who had no clue what they were doing. We were able to bring in what we had learned last time, allowing us not to feel so lost, and allowing me to play some games. Now, the best time to play games or really do anything when you have a newborn is when they are sleeping. Unfortunately, this posed a bit of an issue for me as our newborn didn't really like to take naps unless she was being held, which meant if I wanted to keep up with games, I had to learn how to play them while holding a baby. And frankly, it's not that hard. It does take some extra patience and a slightly awkward grip, but by and large, it was easy enough to get used to. Pretty much every night, I'd bring her down to my office, rock her to sleep, and then play games for a few hours until it was time to wake her up. And I actually got through a lot of titles like this. She was with me as I explored Skyrim for the first time in over a decade, as I uncovered secrets in Animal Well that continuously blew my mind, as I jumped from shell to shell trying to save the ocean from filth and Another Crab's treasure, and most notably, as I played what was my most anticipated, and also what ended up being my favorite game of the year, Shadow of the Erdtree. It's no secret that I adore FromSoft and that their games have had a profound impact on me. There is nothing quite like working through one of their titles for the first time, getting the chance to navigate their beautiful and treacherous worlds, to discover a playstyle that works for me even though it is probably just some variation of using a big sword, and to learn how to defeat their deadly and sometimes abstruse bosses is something I cherish. And all of these things felt like they were taken to a new level here. And that's wild because this is a DLC, not a full game, although its scope is certainly bigger than most full games, so I am just going to consider it one. The world is breathtaking, with each area being more awe-inspiring than the last. The new weapons and abilities offer an incredible amount of versatility, most of which I ignored, but the addition of the deflecting hard tier essentially let me play Sekiro with the gut sword, which is about as good as it gets. And the slate of bosses proved to be my favorite in any FromSoft game other than Sekiro, and yes, I even loved the final boss, who maybe sucked to fight with your build, but was rad as hell to fight with mine. And there was something about experiencing all of this while holding my kid that made it all the sweeter. From worrying that she might wake up because my heart was beating out of my chest after either clutching or choking against a boss, to having to stand still for long periods of time looking out at what could easily be a painting so as to not disturb her while she stirred, she was a part of it all. I can't think of that playthrough without thinking of her. The newborn stage is weird as it goes by in such a blur. You're sleep deprived and constantly on, and you both want it to pass so you can keep seeing them hit milestones, develop into who they'll become, and return to some form of normalcy in life. But also you want to stay in it as long as you can, because once it does pass, they'll never be that young again. You can't ever get it back. And at this point, that time has passed. My baby is careening toward toddlerhood, and despite my many hours of genuflecting at the idol of my own progeny, yes, that is a Northern Lion reference, it is hard to remember what the moment-to-moment experience felt like back then. So many days just blend together, but when I do look back at playing Shadow of the Erdtree, or Another Crab's Treasure, or Animal Well, or Skyrim, or any other game from that time, they act as a sort of anchor to that fleeting stage of life. Connecting games I've played to milestones in my and my family's lives isn't new to me, but connecting them to this specific one, of holding such a new and tiny baby with everything still out in front of her, is. And I'm kind of glad she was terrible at sleeping on her own, because if she hadn't been, it'd be even harder to remember that time than it already is. Once she started to sleep more on her own as well as through the night, normal life started to get back on track, and I continued to play even more good games. I finally tried Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, which never came close to making it onto my radar back when it came out, but it impressed the hell out of me with how much fun there was to be found within its various systems. was. I got through Echoes of Wisdom, which brought back 2D Zelda, something I've been hoping to see for a while, while also incorporating the more modern open-air philosophy of the series, and somehow they pulled it off. Also, I played a bunch of short indie games that I found super compelling, the crown jewel being Thank Goodness You're Here, a title